Okay, good afternoon. I'm calling the 4 o'clock meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for October 27th, 2010 meeting to order. Can we all rise for the pledge, please? Ready? Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McGill, would you please call roll?
Chair Wiscombe.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
K-Spear.
Here.
Ferrara.
Here.
Jacobson. Here. Longstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Lattimore Hall and intern Torres Santos is not present.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McGill. Ms. Rapp, changes to the agenda, please?
Yes, Chair Wiscombe, I would recommend that we take item number 6, which is the interview and appointment of advisory committee members, that we take that prior to doing the street tree items. If one of the candidates is not here, we can revisit it later in the meeting. But we did have a couple of candidates that had things that they had to do that were a time conflict, so they asked to go earlier. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Rapp. Okay, we'll move on to written communications, and in your packet is a letter dated September 25th, 2010 from Jean Tyburn to Nancy Rapp regarding the pruning of the trees on private property. Is there anyone here that's here to speak to this item? Okay. Then we'll move on to public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 1 minute on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for public discussion before the Commission. Do we have anyone here that needs to speak from the public? Okay. Since we have no one, we'll close public comment and we'll move on to community service recognition. Ms. Rapp?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, we feel very privileged to be able to recognize the group that is with us today. And Santos Escobar, our Parks Manager, will do a brief overview presentation prior to recognizing the individuals that are here.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to honor our Santa Barbara County Master Gardeners. And I'd like to recognize our folks that are here today, Mrs. Helen Fowler, Mrs. Lynn Kirby, Mrs. Donna Grubitz, and Mr. Brustad in regards to our butterfly garden at Alice Keck Park. I do have a slideshow to present to you and start. Also, this recognition is to recognize Mr. Grant Castleberg, landscape architect who designed Alice Keck Park back in 1976. We had the honor to go through with Grant to help us also design and implement the Master Gardener's design at Alice Keck Park, which is on the corner of Arriaga Street. And we went through with the tired, worn-out landscape that was there, and with the help with our tireless folks with the Butterfly Master Gardeners, we were able to go through and implement a beautiful design. We first needed to go through and do installation here, so we were quite lucky to have Pete Whittington, our irrigation technician, be able to go through with our Dingo tractor here to go through and dig many holes at Alice. Here's the Master Gardeners doing their thing, having a great time of it. Here we are again, still planting hundreds of plants at the garden that are butterfly friendly. We also not only had some master gardeners, but we had some folks that just showed up just to help us out with a lending hand. So here we are, many flags that were installed early in the morning and installing, like I said, many plants. Here's Donna going through and making sure plants were well watered. And this is our beautiful stone bench. This bench, with the help of Mr. Dawes and an anonymous donor, provided this bench to the park. And it took approximately 6 months to get there, but Bruce told me we would get it installed, and we did, and I want to thank him for all his hard work on this one. It really is a treasure. It's a beauty. It fits well within this landscape. This is a completed landscape that's just looks absolutely marvelous. It's wonderful. We have a pathway that runs through the garden, and you can view it from all sides. You can also, with this particular garden here, it's got lots of beautiful flowers, lots of different colors. Also very friendly to go through and view the park from the street as well. Here's another shot of it. Another item that we will be going through and installing sometime in the near future will be a sign that will go through, and an interpretive sign to go through and show all the beautiful plant material that's been installed and why we installed it, and all the major players that have worked so hard to make this little shrub area just beautiful. And here's our team, if you can recall that. You didn't want to do it, and I said I would need it, and thank you so much. All right, thank you so much.
And as the people from the Master Gardener program are coming up to be recognized, I just want to add my thanks. I remember when they first approached us with the concept, and they said, we'll design it, we'll install it, and we'll take care of it. And it's just a perfect example of how the community works with Parks and Recreation to do beautiful things for the community. We could not do it without you. And I've been there and enjoyed it myself, and it's gorgeous, and I really want to thank you for all of your efforts and for your willingness to take on the project to improve a beautiful city park. Thank you very much. Can you all come forward?
I'd like to echo Ms. Rapp's comments. It's a wonderful community place. I've had the pleasure of actually having a seminar put on when I was going through Master Gardener's training, and it's fascinating the work that went into the space, and also the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, which is really fascinating. So I encourage you to get out and have a look and enjoy the space. And Grant's not here, but I'd also like to say that as a landscape architect, it's easy to design a space that's compatible with nature, but it's very difficult to design a place where one feels as one with nature. And that's exactly the type of place this is. So I'd like to express appreciation to Grant also for that. So on behalf of the Commission and the Parks Department, I actually should speak into this, we'd like to present the Master Gardeners with the Certificate of Appreciation.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And would someone like to speak?
Not me.
I'll always speak.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the recognition. One of the things that, since I have, Donna and Lynn and I have been on since the very first meeting that we had many years ago, and when Grant Castleberg came on board, all of a sudden things started moving. I mean, nothing was moving for the longest time. And he is a very interesting man to work with because he actually listened to us, the great Grant Kosselberg. And he was more than willing. I can remember saying to him one phrase, he wanted to make it all non-natives. And I said, we are trying to attract California butterflies to the area. We need some natives, at least what the food is. But it is, and Santos has always been wonderful to work with. We knew he had more things on his plate than he could ever get done. So sometimes it was a little slower, but thank you very much.
Yeah, because I know that. Did I take a picture? The first time I met Santos, he did say to me.
Can you speak into the mic? Thank you.
When I first met him, I brought him an orchid with several monarch chrysalis hanging on it. He says, Donna, this will happen. It took 5 years, but it did happen.
I would also like to thank Santos because at the beginning when we planted the plants, there was challenges with the irrigation system. And when we hit one, it was a geyser. And he stayed close by knowing that was probably going to happen. And without him and his cooperation, this would have not happened. And thank you for being our right hand and making sure that this did get done. And it's our pleasure to give this to the community. And when you're there and dealing with the public and they get so excited to hear about the butterflies, you show them things, and that's what it was all about. A little piece of heaven in a city park. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Bruce Dodds.
Yes.
And I'm going to just say thank you to Santos. Somebody came to me when I was first went on the Master Gardener program, and we'll give you a bench. You've got to make sure it happens. The two of us, it wasn't as easy as it sounds. So, thank you very much.
Santos.
Come on, Santos.
Yeah.
And I have one other camera. You didn't know this would take this long.
That's quite all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Actually, does the commission have comments or questions? Okay, great.
I just want to thank you all for that. Now I know where that park came from and how it got there, because every Sunday I go down there in the morning and I basically sit on that bench on the little island part and just reflect and look at everything, and it makes my week. It gets my week started right, and I know a lot of others do that too, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
We were there yesterday, and there was a lot of butterflies.
Yep.
Look on the Molenbergia, or the grass that's kind of to the right of the bench, you'll see a chrysalis, a monarch chrysalis. So it's about 7 days old, so in probably 7 more days you'll see an adult. So you can watch it.
I will do that. Thank you.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I appreciate what you guys are doing, and if someone could come to the mic and explain to the general public, how does one get involved with the Master Gardener program?
Go ahead.
The Master Gardeners, we've just gone through some changes, and we have a training program that occurs every year. Historically, it always started in October. We are under the auspices of the University of California Cooperative Extension, who has a partnership with the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. This year, because of some of the changes that had to happen, we are now working with the advisor from San Luis Obispo. We've been consolidated. And so because of all this happened in June and July, we have postponed our classes to January 1. And so if you want to be a member of that, I don't have the numbers here right now. What you can do is you look into the Botanic Garden and you will see Master Gardener Helpline. You can leave a message on there. This is a an advice kind of thing. Leave a message on that line and someone will get back to you and make sure that your name and address and email are on a list, and they will contact you probably by email. We're trying to do more and more electronically. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I actually, just to add to that, because I've manned the helpline recently, so I know the procedure. And we did actually have several calls last time around for information on the program. And I believe the application is available online on November 1st. So you could probably Google Santa Barbara County Master Gardeners and after the 1st of November and actually get the application, and then there'll be an interview process and then a general seminar before the classes actually start. So, and I think they're scheduled to start in February this year. So, yeah.
Okay.
So that's appreciate the explanation. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes. Mr.
Chair,
Escobar.
Commissioners, I do have one other thing to add regarding the UC Extension Master Gardener Santa Barbara County. I would like to also mention that because of this effort here, we are also going through and teaming up once again for another project at the Louise Lowry Davis Center. And if you were to go to the site, which would be on the corner of Delavina and Anapamu, you would notice that we have some browned out turf. And what we're doing is we're going through and we'll be installing a xeriscape garden there. And our first work day will be November the 6th at 9 a.m. And we will be having an educational workshop, and also some additional workshops that will take place the following weekend on November 12th. And then we'll be having work days throughout the entire month of November. And so anybody that is interested in showing up at 9 a.m. to lend another hand, we would greatly appreciate it. So just wanted to let you know about that.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Yeah, it's going to be a workshop that's really hands-on experience for the public too, on how to convert their thirsty lawn to a more sustainable garden. So it should be pretty exciting. So the first one is 9 a.m. on the 6th of November. So thank you.
One other thing that
Yes, would you step up to the mic, please, Bruce? Thank you.
I gave a lecture Tuesday, I think, I guess it was, or anyway, it was last week,
Yes.
on sustainable gardening or
Yes.
sustainable landscaping. This is just the beginning of a whole process of educating the public about sustainable landscaping. And this is going to be one of our goals as Master Gardeners, and anything that we can do for educating the public in that regard, please call on us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you so much to all of you for all the wonderful work you've done at Alice's Park. It's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. So, Mr. Casebeer.
Nothing to report this month.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jacobson?
Let's see. With the youth council, they talked about the grand opening of their teen center and are encouraging any teens to get down there and apply for membership. And they had 3 new applicants that applied and interviewed for youth council. And they discussed the new Speak Out that they're going to do, and they also talked about the Know Your Rights, the teen workshop that's coming up November 15th. That was really big for them. And then with the arts and crafts, as far as I could see, the West Beach Music Festival was fine. I mean, they didn't have too much to say in negative. It was all really very positive, I thought. And also, they just discussed the rules and violations that they've been having. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson. Mr. Farrar?
I am on the liaison for the IPM Advisory Committee, and I think we have a meeting once every quarter, so I'm still waiting to get some.
Thank you. Ms. Longstreet?
Well, Mr. Burns and I are again on the same route, so I'll do Parma Park. I attended the opening Saturday of the new equestrian area and the native planting, and it was a lot of fun. And it was great people there. There were about, I think, 30 volunteers that stayed the morning to plant, from the garden club to Laguna Blanca School. We just had a good time and got a lot of plants planted. I think the goal was something like 1,900, Ms. Zachary, native plants went into the ground. So it's beautiful up there. I would encourage the public to go up and visit the park. It has recovered beautifully from the Tea Fire due to a lot of hard work by many people, and we're all very proud of how it looks right now. So a big thank you to staff and everyone who worked on that.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Yes, Bibi and I seem to work a great team together. Another thing going on this Saturday at 9 o'clock is a workshop for the Front Country Trails Multi-Jurisdictional Task Force, if I've got that correct, at the Louise Lowry Davis Center from 9 until noon, and we're looking forward to hearing some trail participants to give us some advice on how they feel we should be doing the Front Country Trails Multi-Jurisdictional Task Force. That's this coming Saturday, 9 o'clock. The other item, group, Bibi and I are also on the Park Foundation, and we are starting to do a fundraising letter that hopefully people, when they see the letter, they will give funds. So that's all I've got.
Ms. Longstreet?
To add, the Front Country Trails, I think this is a work session to sort of look at where the committee wants to go. So that we will be taking public input, but I do believe the bulk of it is going to be looking at what we've learned so far and how we're going to put that into a form. So,
is that meeting this Saturday or the 6th?
This Saturday.
It is, okay.
It's a pre-Halloween meeting at 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Okay, I have several things to report on. Saturday, 25th of September, I had the pleasure of spending the morning and getting some blisters on my hands at the Day of Caring at La Mesa Park, and we're having a report on that later on. But we all had a lot of fun. Volunteers did a great job and worked hard, and staff did a fantastic job in mobilizing a group of that size and organizing them and keeping them moving, which we did. So it was really fun. On Thursday, the 7th of October, I attended the regular Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, and Mr. Downey reported on the violations, cases closed and pending violations since last month's meeting. And then we reviewed and made our site visits to the items that are on your agenda for today. And on Thursday, the 21st, Ms. Longstreet and I both attended the Lights On After School celebration at Franklin Elementary Auditorium, which was just great fun. The kids they had dance groups, and they put on just really great performance for all of us. And I did talk to several leaders and administrators of the program, and they all said without fail that the program would not be possible without the partnership and support of Parks and Recreation Department. So accolades to the department for that, because they just said it's a super partnership and works really well. And they're expanding the number of schools where the program's available. So that's all I have. So I guess we can move on to commission and staff communications. Ms. Rapp, do we have?
I don't have anything, Chair Wiscombe.
Okay, thank you. How about youth council report?
Commissioners, I'll give that report tonight. Our youth intern, Diego Torres Santos, actually has a conflict right now with his schedule due to work commitments in school. So he regrets that he can't be here tonight, and the Youth Council may consider actually appointing another youth intern based on what he thinks his schedule is going to be, because they do feel it's really important to have someone here. So the Youth Council, along with other youth leadership groups, including the Future Leaders of America, the West Side Community Centers, Monawea, not sure I pronounced that correctly, and San Marcos Mujercitas will host a youth speak out workshop on teen rights with the subjects of teen dating violence, drugs and alcohol, school rights, and traffic stops. And that will be on Monday, November 15th at the Davis Center, starting at 5:30. So all ages of youth are welcomed and encouraged to attend to learn more about these subjects with teens. And I will encourage adults who are also listening that this is to attend the youth speak outs is very interesting, to really hear the kids talk about what they think, because that's really what the focus is. This is all about the kids talking. So that is their big event that they have coming on. So with that, we can move on.
Thank you, Ms. Rapp. Does anyone have anything? No? Okay. So we're on to the consent calendar, and for action, approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on September 22nd, 2010. Does anyone have any comments? Any changes?
I'd move to approve.
A second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? No? Okay. Carries unanimously. Minutes are approved. Okay, and now we are on to Street Tree Advisory Committee items.
Chair Wiscombe, I think we'll do item number 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have an arrow here, and then I totally lost it. So, sorry. We're on to item number 6, which is the Advisory Committee appointments. So the first, let's start with, is Christina, can we start with Ms. McGinnis? Yes, okay. Let's start with Ms. McGinnis, if you step up. Also give us your name, please.
Thank you, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners. My name is Christina McGinnis, and I work for the Environmental Defense Center, and I was just recently contacted to be on the IPM committee, and I'm very excited about this. Working with Eric Cardenas, who, as you know, was pretty instrumental in getting a lot of the pesticide use out of the parks in the city and other areas. Hard footsteps to follow, but I'm interested in the FAIR system and how it's applied, and I think that's an interesting concept. And I've worked in IPM issues before. I've dealt with some IPM issues related to military bases, actually, in my past as a planner. I'm a policy person and planner, and I actually do a project for the Environmental Defense Center that's called the OPEN Project, and it stands for the Open Space Preservation and Education Network, looking at preserving agriculture and open space for all of unincorporated Santa Barbara County. But I'm excited to get involved in city issues as well. So,
okay. Thank you very much, Ms. McGinnis.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, I was going to open it up for questions.
Yeah, we've been challenged with the budget recently, and one of the topics that's come up, because I was on the commission back when we adopted IPM, and we know it affects our ability to get work done. How do you see us involving volunteers and kind of beefing up that side of our program so that we can hold to the standards and keep our parks looking nice. Do you have any ideas, or have you seen that work in other areas?
Well, EDC depends on volunteers for a lot of things, and I think there might even be an opportunity to have an intern at EDC try to work on getting some volunteers together for that sort of thing, and I certainly understand the need for free labor to supplement paid stuff. So yeah, I'd be happy to help with that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions? I just have one. Are you opposed to the use of pesticides, or are you well, I'll just ask it. I'll ask it that way. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I think I have, as part of my open work, been working with agriculturalists up and down Santa Barbara County. I'm also a member of the Agricultural Futures Alliance, which is a group, the first time that environmentalists and agricultural interests have come together to look at the future of ag in the county. And one of the things that we did as a group was to look at formulating an agricultural buffer policy, because Santa Barbara County really doesn't have one. So we as a group put together a policy, and one of the things that we dealt with in that policy formulation and recommendation was looking at how pesticides, pesticide drift, and those sorts of things, they're very much needed by the ag community to take care of certain concerns, but looking at sensitivity to those. So I certainly have now a better understanding about the importance of why, especially in the ag community, they're needed. But I do understand on the city level too that probably for some vectors and also other issues that has to be applied. So no, I'm not opposed to pesticide use.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer to that question. Very good. Okay, anyone else? Okay, do I hear a motion?
I would move we have one applicant well qualified for this position, and I would move that we appoint Christina McGinnis to the IPM Advisory Committee.
Second the motion.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the IPM.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the Golf Course Advisory Committee. We have one opening and two applicants. So is Judy Burrell here? Okay. Ms. Burrell, would you step on up and...
Okay, I don't know what you want to hear from me. I'd be glad to answer questions. I don't know if you have my application in front of you.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes.
I've been involved with the golf course since '03. I've served on the board every year but one. I have a good working relationship with the pro shop, with the women's club, and even the maintenance crew. In fact, I renamed Mark Green in a letter inadvertently to him, which I thought was much more appropriate. I don't know if you have any questions about my qualifications, or I don't know what you want to know.
Yes, Mr. Burns.
Do you realize how much time it will take, and are you willing to give the time?
Okay, tell me how much time it takes, because I don't have a clue. This was recommended to me by Chris Tellerico, that I apply. Evidently, he saw something in me that would fit the bill. Mm-hmm. So you tell me, and I'll let you know if I can.
Well, the advisory committee meets every other month at 5:30 p.m. for usually a couple hours max, and during these tough economic times, and with rounds down at all golf courses, including Muni, there's been some members of the advisory committee that devote extra time, and it's usually a lunch hour from 12 to 1 or 12 to 1:30 up at the golf course to strategize ways, marketing, basically, basically brainstorming different ways to increase rounds at the golf course. And that's obviously optional, but
Oh, I'm already there 3 days a week.
yeah.
So a little extra time probably wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Does anyone else have? Yes. Mr. Ferrara.
Good afternoon, Ms. Burrell.
Afternoon.
How are you doing? I was just curious because I'm learning more about golf as I sit on this commission. But what does a handicap chair do?
The handicap chair records all of the scores, makes sure all the scores are recorded correctly on our computer, makes adjustments for people that have a problem remembering how many strokes they had. I also receive the indexes from the GIN, GHIN, twice a month, and I post those indexes, and then the handicap is derived from whatever that index is for that month.
Okay, so you have a pretty good working knowledge of what's going on
I
out
do.
there.
I've been doing it for a while.
Thank you.
And that's no easy job, by the way.
I enjoy it,
Yeah.
or I wouldn't be doing it.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? Okay. Thank you very much,
You're very
Ms. Burrell,
welcome.
for applying. And we're going to hear from the other applicant, Mr. Trentacosti? Trentacosti, Charles Trentacosti.
Hi, I'm Charlie Trentacosti.
Welcome.
Thank you. The reason I applied for this is it looked like a good opportunity for me to. I have a pretty extensive business background, and I've sat in on advisory councils, industry kinds of councils, and I thought this might be a way I can contribute a little back to the community. I'm a user of the golf course, big user.
Okay. That was going to be my first question, because that wasn't in your application.
That I use the golf course?
Are you a golfer?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Not very good golfer, but hopefully with more practice.
You don't have to be a good golfer. No. Okay. Questions from the commission? Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
Yes, Mr. Trentacosti, could you describe some of your skills that you might bring to the golf course?
Sure. Some of the experiences I've had were managing multi-million-dollar businesses, profit and loss, sales and marketing, that whole thing for some large corporations. And so I understand the business process. I understand the go-to-market strategies for different markets, and the trade-offs you need to make a lot of times for those things. And again, I've also got a lot of marketing experience. I was a marketing manager for a couple of organizations as well, and also understand the project management process as well. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah. Any other? Yes, Ms. Longstreet.
Do you belong to any of the clubs out there, the home clubs or?
I belong to the Santa Barbara Golf Club. I'm a resident there.
Okay.
I don't play enough to be the, what do they call, the preferred member there, but I'm a resident member there.
Okay, but we have like the different.
There's a
clubs.
men's club.
The men's club that, well, you don't belong to the women's club, but the Paisanos
Yes.
and,
Oh, no,
you
no.
know, there's, I think, 4 or 5 different home clubs. 6?
Yeah.
Okay. So have you ever attended any of the meetings that go on out at the golf course to
No,
hear
no,
what,
no,
okay,
no.
to hear what they're up to?
Yes, Mr. Burns.
Actually, the same question I asked the other applicant. Now you kind of know what is expected. Do you have time to do this?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have put my hat in the ring if I didn't. And I read the requirements for the position, but I'm sure there's extracurricular time involved as well, and I'm willing to put that in too.
Okay.
I understand the economic pressures that are going on, and
Any other discussion or questions? Okay. Thank you very much for applying.
thank you all.
Appreciate it. So, do we have discussion or?
Well, we have 2 qualified applicants, and I appreciate both of their applications and willing to serve. I think it's always tough, but there are plenty. The one thing I would say before we have any motions go down is there are plenty of ways to be involved in our golf course, I think, as Ms. Burrell has shown us. But I guess at this point, I would lean toward Ms. Burrell's knowledge of our course and the activities, and then I would hope Mr. Trinacosta would get involved in some of the, stay involved and just come to us again because our spots will reopen. So I guess I would move for Ms. Burrell.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I second that.
Okay. So we have a motion before us for Ms. Judy Burrell to be appointed. Any other discussion? Or yes, Mr. Burns.
I agree with Bibi that we have actually two very well qualified applicants who will be bringing different things to the table, and it's an interesting dilemma to have two great people here. I will go with the board, but I'm tending possibly towards the gentleman, but we'll see how it flies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My comment, whichever one gets appointed, I would encourage the other, because you both have skill sets that the golf course can use and are excellent. The meetings are public. There's time for public comment. You can get involved, get engaged in that way if you don't get appointed to the advisory committee, because both of your skill sets can be used by the golf course. So that's my comment. Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second for appointing Ms. Judy Burrell, and there's no other comments. We'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Burns and Mr. K-Spear opposed. Motion carries, and congratulations to you. And I do hope that you will take that to heart and come out and bring some of your skills out to the meetings where the public is always invited. Thank you so much. Thank you both for applying. Okay, so that's the advisory appointments. And now we can move on to the Street Tree Advisory Committee items. We're on item A1, which is 903 West Mission Street. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, 903 West Mission Street. The tree is actually located on the Gillespie side of the property. That section of Gillespie has two designated trees. This is one of them. The other one is the Coverteria. The committee reviewed this site and determined that there was space for additional trees if the spacing were changed, and determined that eventually two trees would provide, of the other species of the Coverteria, would provide much more shade than this one species does, and therefore, based on the fact that of an eventual overall benefit to the community, they recommend that this be approved on the condition that two Coverterias be planted in its place.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Downey. I don't have any speaker slips, so I assume there's... Are you here to speak on an item? Okay, you need to fill out a speaker slip, please. They're in the back, and just so we don't get behind on that. Yeah.
Chair Wiscombe?
Yes.
The recommendation is for two 24-inch box Coverterias. I apologize.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now I will open it up for discussion amongst the commission members. Mr. K-Spear?
Yes, I would concur with staff's recommendation here. I went by and looked at the existing tree, and it is not the healthiest tree, and I think by planting 2 others, it'll fill in that space. It's kind of a big open gap along Gillespie Street. So I concur.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casepier. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, I have just a question for staff with a comment first. Over the last couple of years, I haven't seen a recommendation that states that greater shade potential and long-term benefit if we were to plant new trees. We've just never seemed to before cut down trees because there will be better trees in the future. And is that a new direction we're taking, or is it just that I've missed that and we've been doing that in the past? Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Burns, as a reminder, we always take each situation on a case-by-case basis. Many of those cases that you're citing, the spacing allowed for additional trees to be planted and the existing trees to remain. The spacing at this particular site would be overcrowded if we installed additional trees because of the placement of this tree. One of the considerations for approval in the municipal code allows for an overall benefit to the community, and I think by honoring this request and providing 2 trees, the eventual shade that these will produce is greater than the benefit that we're currently receiving and will be younger, therefore last longer than this one will over time.
I'd just like to add to that, too. The Commission heard a report last month or the month before on about the street tree population, and one of the things that came up was the age of all the trees. The street trees are relatively close to one another. So although this would not be a reason to do that, there is the added benefit that we're getting we're getting 2 for 1, and we're getting some younger trees in here too. So I think that's something to look at.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, I would just like to remark on Commissioner Burns' observation. The Commission has in the past had a leaning, where appropriate, for trees that provide a greater shade canopy because they are such a benefit to the immediate neighborhood. And I think with all the different factors, so while it is not a common reason for supporting the removal and a planting of a different variety, it is a factor that gets taken into consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Rapp. Yes, Ms. Jacobson.
I did have a question on West Mission. When I looked at a couple of houses down the street, there's another tree that's exactly the same, and it's huge, and it has beautiful shade. Is this one just sort of dwarfed or something, that it wouldn't grow as big as the other one down the street? Because it was shading everything.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Jacobson, trees are very similar to people in that people grow to different sizes and shapes, and trees do as well. This tree is mature, so it's pretty much developed the shape that it's going to develop. It doesn't have much potential to get much more shade than it currently has.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Burns.
Just another question or a comment. If over the years we get people that come in here and say, well, I want to get rid of this tree because it's messing up my sewer line, for instance, and generally we say, well, that's not good enough, or we want to take down this tree because it's ruining my view, and we say, no, you can't do that. But it's a slippery slope that if someone comes and says, well, we're going to take down this tree, just because we want to have 2 trees, different locations that'll give a better shade potential, and I just see that we'll suddenly get requests talking about shade potential instead of the real reason is that they've got a problem with their sewer line. And I'll go along with this. I don't have an issue other than I just see we're changing slightly. Maybe it's just my perspective.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Longstreet?
Make a motion that we accept the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations for removal of this tree and replacement with 2 24-inch box Chinese flame trees.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, fine. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, take it to a vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Now we move on to item A2, 1711 Loma Street, and we do have a speaker. Mr. Hack? Yes, please step up.
Yeah, I own this property, and from my perspective, the tree is just significantly too large for the location, has destroyed my irrigation in that area, broken the water meter, which I had to pay for, broken my main water line, which I had to pay for, broken my sewer line, which I had to pay for, and $600 water bill for the month the water line was broken. It's cracked my foundation and garage floors, which I had to pay for. And now, if you have my picture, there's big roots coming up in the bottom of my house, where the garages are. And it's essentially just destroying my home. Had the tree commission come out previously to look at it, and they said that all the water was just because there was shade under the tree, and that the dew wasn't going away, but it had broken the main sewer line, the main water line. And for some reason, I'm responsible for all those costs. So something's got to change.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
I have a question.
Okay, we'll... Oh, gosh. Sorry, Tim. Yeah. No, it's all right. I just took it out of order. I should have let Mr. Downey go first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the tree at 1711 Loma Street is a large carob tree. It's been there for many years. The applicants provided photographic evidence of all the things he just stated. The committee concurs with this assessment and recommends that it be approved on the condition he replace with the designated street tree, which is the Australian willow.
Okay, thank you. And again, I apologize for that. I think I can maybe open public comment. Did you have a question of the applicant?
No, I'll pass on the question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we've closed public comment, and now we move on to commission discussion and questions. Okay. Yes, Ms. Jacobson.
I went and looked, and I saw all the challenges that this tree is producing. My question was that the street itself is a challenge. It's almost like a one lane with the cars parked on the side of the road, and I was just wondering what it takes to take down that size of a tree and what it's going to do to the neighbors for that afternoon or however long it takes.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Jacobson, we deal with this challenge all the time. When it's time to remove a large tree, it does have an impact on the neighborhood as far as transportation and getting around. But it becomes necessary at some point, and again, staff is supporting the committee's recommendation to conditionally approve this removal.
Oftentimes there's, as on Brinkerhoff, there was signs put up for, days in advance on when those trees came down. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone want to make a motion?
I move that, how does this go? I move that the tree be removed on the condition that the applicant replace the tree with the designated street tree Australian willow.
Okay. Do I hear a second? No, I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so now we move on to item number B1, 10 Portola Lane. And Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the tree at 10 Portola Lane, the trees at 10 Portola Lane are two king palms located in the front setback. The applicant is requesting to remove the trees, but doesn't want to destroy them. He wants to find somebody to save the trees to a location off-site. And he has offered to replant with a persimmon tree, and the committee concurs with that recommendation. The recommendation is to approve on the condition the persimmon tree is planted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. Sir, Mr. Hack, I should have advised you, if you don't agree with the decision of the commission, you have 10 days to appeal it to City Council. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Now, we have no public comment on this item. Is that correct? Okay. So I will open it for discussion.
I would move that we concur with the Street Tree Committee recommendation on 10 Portola Lane.
Okay.
I would like to amend that motion to include that the applicant would do his utmost to
relocate
the two palm trees.
Mr.
I have a
Mr.
question.
Farrar? Yes.
Before we go to the motion, is why are we making a recommendation to remove the trees in the first place? Is the one tree in jeopardy, the smaller tree, due to its health or something, if these trees are not removed, or is it just the aesthetics that we're basing this decision on?
Commissioner Wiscombe and Farrar, excuse me, the applicant's reasons were for aesthetics and didn't fit with the style of house that he has there. His desire is to have something that provides a little more shade. The committee concurred that the persimmon tree eventually would provide much more shade than the palms do. In addition to that, the applicant's desire to preserve the trees to be used somewhere effective elsewhere was commendable and agreed with that.
Thank you, Mr. Downey.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we have a motion before the commission and a second. Recommend the removals with
Wiscombe, can I just,
Yes.
before you go too much further, did the maker of the motion agree with the amendment?
Yes.
Yes, because my motion was to concur with the
Right.
street tree recommendation, which is the committee recommends that the commission approve the removals. Staff recommends the removals are approved on the condition the applicant replaced with the persimmon. So that is why I used their wording, was to incorporate their replacement also.
Right, but the seconder also,
The removal, you want to add the removal?
he also just added that he wants to make sure that the applicant does the utmost possible to have the existing palms relocated.
And I agree with that.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, so that's our motion. Mr. Burns.
Just on a discussion perspective, if staff could explain what do we consider the utmost possible? I don't want to give that applicant, something that he can't do? What would you expect him to try to do? Make 10 phone calls? Make 100 phone calls? Make 3 phone calls? Do you see where I'm trying to...
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Burns, the last month we had a relocation, or a couple of months ago, excuse me, on Grove Lane, where the applicant was successful in finding people. Staff is happy to put this applicant in touch with people who are willing to relocate trees, and strongly feel it'll be successful.
And I believe the letter from the applicant also says that they are willing to try to find a nursery or a source for the trees. A place for the trees. Okay, so that's our motion. That's our second. Take it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. We are now on to item number C1, which is 1032 Mason Street. Mr. Downey?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, the 1032 Mason Street has a proposed project to add some senior low-income housing to the property. As when they've been going through the process, they have been looking at the parking requirements, have asked for modifications to that because of the use of the site, and their application. Well, let me back this up a little. This commission has seen the pepper tree come to them before. The palm trees are new. At the last meeting when we reviewed the pepper tree, there was no landscape plan provided, and the Street Advisory Committee and this commission voted to postpone a decision until the applicant provided a landscape plan. That landscape plan is in your packet. The applicant, the project, the development of the parking lot for this project would cause these trees to be removed because they would then be parking spaces where these trees exist. The committee looked at that. They concurred that the 3 requested palms, the 2 small ones, and the one farthest into the parking lot of the large 2 should be approved. They looked at the design and determined that there was a space in the design that they're showing bicycle parking, which could be turned into a parking space. The committee didn't want to completely deny the pepper tree. They wanted the applicant to explore changing that parking space to try and preserve the pepper tree. The recommendation from the committee is to approve the 3 palms and deny the pepper tree without, I'm sorry, I'm losing the term, without prejudice, so that if the other design review bodies won't allow that modification to the parking lot, they could come back and get a secondary approval for the pepper tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. Okay, we have Bonnie Sangster from Pickert Group Architects, who's available. You're available to answer questions. Do you have something to say?
I would like to say.
Okay, fine.
We did
Please.
study the particular place suggested as an alternate, and we would have used that space if we could, because we're already short of the required parking.
You speak into the mic.
We're required by code to have 25 spaces. We've been able to fit 22, and everything is really constrained and designed to the inch. And the place where the bike racks are is, if that if that had been a space, it would be conflicting with the back out space for the van unloading. So we would have used that for us parking if we could have, and yeah, just if we could express that the church has every intent of providing a handsome landscape, but we just couldn't fit that pepper tree.
So are you getting a departure then from ABR for the parking required parking spaces?
Right,
Is
we're requesting a modification.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Does someone on the yes, Mr. Burns? Did you have a question?
I just wanted to. So, after you talked with the Street Tree Advisory Committee, you guys looked again to see if there was any way around it, and you're telling us you don't see any way around
We're
it.
completely constrained. It would, I think, mean not being able to have that parking space, and given the requirements from the city, I think we need to stand by that.
Anyone else have any questions? Ms. Sangster? No. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I visited the site. What was the existing street tree? Do you remember, Mr. Downey? There's one right outside by the pepper tree, as I recall.
And Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Longstreet, if you look at the photo of the pepper tree up there, there's a palm tree adjacent to that. And I do recall there is another street tree just out of the picture of the two small palms, but I don't recall what that is off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
There's one shown on the plan as an existing street tree.
Yeah,
but it's and I don't recall what it is. It's west of the palm tree that's on the
And my other question is, I'm not the best at reading these plans, but what is the replacement tree? We see a tree going in at that site, kind of a little more towards the street. Any idea what that is? I mean, is that going to be a decent-sized shade tree or a...
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Longstreet, if I recall, this is just a preliminary plan with a proposed palette, so the trees haven't been specifically identified completely yet.
Thank you. And it wasn't just my reading of it.
Yes, Mr. Burns.
And so, if I got this figured out in my head, we can say we want to keep the tree, but then the ABR would have to instead say 22 parking spaces. They would have to say 21 parking spaces would be acceptable. And then is that where we're at on this? Or am I missing something? Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Burns, I think it's perfectly acceptable to come up with a motion that might allow for either opportunity. That a motion could be made to approve the pepper on the condition the other review body does not allow for other parking modifications. That's certainly a possibility. That would allow for the other review body to do what they need to do, and still the applicant would have a decision on the tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Downey. Anyone else? Okay, do we have a motion or?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Casegear.
I would like to move that we would remove the 3 palm trees. Is that right? 3?
Yes, that's correct.
And the pepper tree. And that's my motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And I'd like to speak to that.
Yes, okay.
I just feel, our community needs senior housing. Every time that we send these applicants back, it costs the applicant, which is the Second Baptist Church, money and time and energy. And Pepper Tree is it's a significant tree, but it's not a historical tree. I think we could sacrifice this tree and end up planting something as nice or better and see this project move along. That's my reasoning.
I would agree with Mr. K-Spear's sentiments. I would actually, if the maker of the motion and the seconder would agree, we have a tree shown on the landscape plan. We don't know what species it is yet on the preliminary landscape plan. I'd like to see it stipulated that there is a street tree put back in that location. Not a street tree, sorry, a setback tree put back in that location in the general area of where it's shown on the landscape plan.
Maybe we could just put with the motion that we are appreciative of the number of trees being added to this project on this preliminary plan. As it goes forward, I think it may have some changes, but I counted up, and it was a quick count, but 18 new trees on the property. So what, to me, we want to convey is that we are sad to lose a mature tree, but we are appreciative of the number of other trees going in.
Yeah, I think that's.
So if we could add that as a comment to the motion, then maybe that would take care of it.
Mr. K-Spear?
I accept that.
Okay, that's great. Okay. So yes, Mr. Burns.
Yeah, it looks like we're heading that this will be approved with taking down the 3 trees and the pepper tree, and it's just my comment. I would appreciate the fact that the other commissions and committees on the state and in our city just don't, I'd rather have one less parking space and a mature tree, but that's just my opinion.
Yes, Mr. Ferrara.
Let me make sure, I want to make sure I have this straight. There's 6 units, and this pepper tree would be standing in the way of one of those parking spaces, and if there's 6 units, that still leaves 3 parking spaces for each unit. I think I might have heard the young lady mention that it's an area where they're going to be doing a lot of service area, and is that correct?
I think it's the existing use has to be accommodated for some parking also. Okay. The 6 units are going on to existing use of a church.
It's still the site of the church.
Okay, so this
it's
is
to accommodate all uses on the property.
All uses.
Right.
Most of the parking is devoted to the church. Yeah.
Okay, I understand then. That's very good. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion before us to approve the removal of the 3 Mexican fan palms and the California pepper, with a comment from the commission that they are appreciative of the preliminary landscape plan in terms of all the proposed new trees on the site. Is that correct? Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Nay? Mr. Burns is nay? Okay. So the motion carries 5-1. Great. Okay. Now we move on to item number D1, which is 2215 De La Vina Street. Mr. Downey?
Chair, Wisconsin Commissioners, 2215 De La Vina Street is the existing motel. This large sycamore has served many years the community. It currently has 3 different levels where it has been topped, and the regrowth is becoming unmanageable, and this tree could start falling apart. The committee wavered over this one. They ended up with a tie vote. So they do not have a recommendation for you because a tie vote is no recommendation. Therefore, staff is making a recommendation that this be approved on the condition that they replant with another sycamore. And that recommendation is based on the fact that they're going ahead to replace the tree, and that tree will hopefully be developed properly and provide a long benefit to the community.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Downey. We don't have any public comment on this item, so I'll open it up to the commission for discussion. Yes, Mr. Ferrara.
Yes, Mr. Downey, I think I have this correct. He said it's been topped 3 times in the past, correct? And I'm looking at this picture right here, and it looks like it's just on the right side where there's this big part of the tree, some branches sticking out. Almost looks like a tree growing from a tree there, or a bush growing from the tree. But would pruning those that area away from there give the tree any strength? You mentioned too it's falling apart, and I kind of want to get an idea what that means is when you say it's falling apart.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Ferrara, the trees, when they are, well, let me clarify this particular tree. This tree has been topped in 3 separate locations, more than 3 times, but in 3 separate locations. When a tree is topped rather than cut back to another branch, what happens is the tree responds by putting on a flush of new growth that grows from that cut, and it's not attached as strongly as the branch was originally. What happens is they grow very fast, and if you don't do something extremely regularly to keep them in check, then they become heavy and they start to rip out. Because of the 3 different locations of this topping, they've got 3 sets of 3 times the complexities to deal with to try and manage a tree that's trying to put on this foliage to survive, and it's just, in staff's opinion, it's waiting for disaster.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Casebeer?
So, Mr. Downing, are you saying that this tree has been butchered over the years?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Casebeer, I don't like the term butcher. It's more of a term for meat packers. So I will say that there could have been better pruning practices.
Yes. And so this is an example of mismanagement. It's a beautiful tree. It's been there many years. It's a mature, the base is 3 feet in diameter, so and it pains me to see it go, but if it had been cared for along the way, we wouldn't be where we are today. Is that accurate?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Casebeer, that is a true statement, yes.
I believe the word that Mr. Downey used when we visited the site was that the tree had been compromised, and that it would need a extremely aggressive arborist plan to have any hope. Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation to allow the removal of this tree and to replant with the tree that staff would recommend. Right now, there's no recommendation from staff on a replacement. Or wait, you said
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Casebeer, the applicant has offered to replant with the same species of tree. Because this tree is on a landscape plan for that property, they either have to replant with the same kind of tree, or they have to go back to the commission that approved that plan and ask for a change. Since they are offering to plant the same kind of tree, they would remain in compliance with their plan.
So is the motion clear?
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to item number E, which is approve the request to designate the following species to the street tree master plan. And the first is E1, which is the 00 block of Chapala Street.
Madam Chair, in the interest of time, I'm wondering if the commission would like to just go through these and take them all together as a unit.
The Chapala Street, yes, that would be fine.
I would suggest you take items E1 through 4, unless commissioners have a different vote pending their discussion. I mean, unless you sense that there's a need to take items separately.
No, I don't think so, unless we just grouped the Chapala ones together and kept Grove Lane separately, but I'm happy to do them all together unless there's an objection.
I would be happy for that.
Okay. Let's
Mr. Downey may want to present what the changes will be.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, I'll go through all of these and then entertain any questions. The first three of the items, the replacements are changes to the designation because of the oleander trees that are currently designated, and that would be the reason to change the designation due to the oleander leaf scorch we discussed last month. The first section, the 0 block of Chapala, the committee looked at numerous items. They looked at the parkway size, they looked at the surrounding areas of trees, and they looked at the potential for adding some diversity to this area. And their recommendation for this block is a co-designation of Koraka, excuse me, I do that every time, I apologize, and Cape Pittosporum as street trees for this section. The next section would be the 100 block, east side only, the east side of the street only. And in looking at the different species they were selecting, they decided upon recommending lily of the valley tree. And the final block is the 200 block on the east side. They noted that there was some other trees in the area that provided some color, and determined that the red cap eucalyptus also provided some color and is underused, and so they're recommending that one for that section of Chapala. And the final one is the 400 to 600 block of Grove Lane, where the evergreen pears are designated. This was brought forth by applicant a couple of months ago, who requested some removals and is required to plant 2 street trees. The concern is the condition of the evergreen pears in that location with the fire blight dieback. The committee evaluated her suggestions. The first 2 of her suggestions were too large and too disruptive for the site. The ginkgo was third on her list, and they noted that in that section there are a couple of fairly new island oaks planted, and their motion is to recommend that these 2 trees be co-designated for these sections of Grove Lane.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Downey. I'd just like to add to that, the committee worked very, very hard on the Chapala Street recommendations. They visited the site several times, developed lists, and really did a lot of work on that. So I have to commend them for that. And I'd like to open it up for discussion. Anyone have anything? Yes.
I would make a motion that we accept these street tree designation changes.
Second.
Okay. Any other
And
questions?
just send our appreciation to the Street Tree Advisory Committee for all their work.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. So now we are on to administrative and staff reports, the first of which is the coastal cleanup and the Day of Caring report.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, Parks Manager Santos Escobar is going to just give you a quick overview of some volunteer efforts that took place in our creeks and in our parks. And we're really trying to share where we are working with volunteers. Volunteers make such a difference in helping us maintain our environmental areas. So with that, Mr. Santos,
Thank you so much, Chair Wiscombe, Commissioners. I'm very excited to be here this afternoon and talk about our very busy day on September 25th, Saturday. We had a lot of fun in the city of Santa Barbara as well as the county of Santa Barbara. For the United Day of Caring, it marked the 19th annual Day of Caring. And we were actually very fortunate to have 2 work days. We had 2 work days, and one was at Alice Keck Park. We had over 40 volunteers that helped go through and clean all the decomposed granite walkways, as well as weeding the walkways, as well as going through and sweeping and raking the outside perimeter sidewalks as well. So that was very nice. I do apologize, I don't have any photos of those particular volunteers, but I do have some photos of our La Mesa Park volunteer work day where we had over 60 volunteers from the cottage house system, as well as some park staff and a few other folks as well. So we did a very nice job in this particular parking lot area here. This particular little hillside that separates Shoreline Drive and La Mesa Park hasn't been planted in over 5 years, and we decided we would take on this project and beautify it. And as you can tell, we have a range of students to adults, and so family, friends, and members of the cottage house system pitched in for over 4 hours, and we made a big difference at La Mesa Park. And here we are going through and planting vigorously. We planted over 150 lantana, and we also planted, the photo here is agave attenuata, just to mix things up a little bit and add a little diversity to the area. We had a lot of fun here beautifying the front area here, and it'll make a big difference. I've had several phone calls, people thanking us for all the hard work and just how beautiful this entrance now looks with beautiful curb appeal. We also went through on this particular day, did a lot of raking of leaves, cleaning the playground. We spread over 35 yards of mulch in the park itself. So we had a little bit of everything for everybody to do, and everybody just had a wonderful time at the park. There we have Chair Wiscombe, and she was
Thank you.
one of the hardest workers there, let me tell you. Great. Thank you so much. Secondly, we had on Saturday 25th, which marked the 26th Annual International Coastal Cleanup Day. In Santa Barbara County, we had over 1,300 volunteers, which collected over 3,840 pounds of trash and 1,270 pounds of recyclables at 28 beach and creek sites. It's like, wow, we did a lot of work that particular day. Also, naturally, since it was Day of Caring, we also had volunteers from Day of Caring that also volunteered to help at the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum and the Ty Warner Sea Center in cleaning up East Beach, while Santa Barbara Channel Keeper led volunteers at West Beach, and the Urban Creeks Council cleaned up around the Mission Creek Lagoon, and Stearns Wharf, and the Santa Barbara County Fire Department hosted a cleanup at Ledbetter Beach. This was also one of the first years that we encouraged to bring your own reusable bucket or bag to clean up the beach, in efforts as such which kept hundreds of plastic bags from reaching the landfill. Also, Creeks and Beach continues to do community restoration projects, educational programs as well, which continue throughout the Creek Week, and we had a whopping 1,500 participants in 23 events in Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, and Goleta, which is just outstanding. Just all the volunteers that just came out on that particular day. And we went through with our Creeks manager, Mr. Cameron Benson, and look who we have here, Commissioner Casebeer. And as you can tell, a truckload of just lots of things that we just retrieve from our creek system there. It's a shame that people do this. But it's a joy that we get so many volunteers to come out and help. And we even get in the muck.
Up to my... That's Mission Creek.
So that concludes our presentation for this evening on this. If you have any questions,
Thank you very much, Mr. Escobar. This is the Coastal Cleanup County. We had, between the Day of Caring and the Coastal Cleanup, close to 1,400 volunteers. It's phenomenal. And that's on one day. It's really incredible. And I just did a quick calculation, and on the Coastal Cleanup Day, over 3 pounds of trash per person were picked up. So that's a lot of cigarette butts and cans. It's just really amazing. And La Mesa Park just looks great. I have the pleasure of walking through there on most mornings, and it just looks beautiful. So thank you all. Comments from the commission? Or okay. Thank you again. Excellent. Okay, we now move on to agenda item number 5, Parks and Recreation Fiscal Year 2011 Budget for information. Ms. Rapp?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, this is unusual. We don't usually come back and give you an overview of our budget once it's adopted and everything is moving forward. But I really felt that with the significant attention and work that the Commission put last year into developing the recommendations and the priorities for the fiscal year 11 budget, and because there were changes to the budget that were made at Council following the recommendations to the Commission. So what tonight I really want to do is to kind of give you an overview of, hey, this is what we've got, The presentation will also include just kind of a repetition for some, but just a kind of looking at our budget, where our money comes from, where do we spend money, so a little bit of overview. I also spent some time doing some analysis of the impacts to the Parks and Recreation Department General Fund over the last couple of years with the reductions, and I'll go over that. And then I think it's really important because we've spent a lot of time talking about the budget cuts and that impact, and yes, there has been an impact, but there is still a significant amount of services and efforts that the department makes providing parks and recreation and those services to the community. And so I just wanted to kind of focus on those a little bit, because sometimes we forget that all that work is going on every day. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights and the major efforts. So with that, just a quick recap. The department's total budget is about $17.6 million. The Creeks Fund and the Golf Fund budget are both in the area of $2 million each, and our largest portion of our budget is the general fund budget. Again, the department has 5 divisions. Creeks, which is funded through a special fund through a portion of the city's TOT, bed tax. And the golf course, which is an enterprise fund, which means it gets no support from the city's general fund from tax dollars. It operates completely off of monies generated at the golf course. And then we have 3 divisions: parks, recreation, and administration, which are funded through the general fund. Altogether, for fiscal year 11, the department has 95.1 full-time equivalent. That's what the FTE. So that number of staff positions total. And we have almost 96,000 hours for hourly staff. That's what's in our budget. That's a lot of hours. And the department is one of the largest employers of hourly employees. We have I think it was like 280 part-time employees that fall into that classification. And shifting focus to the general fund, and that will be the focus of my presentation this evening. Just a reminder that the department is responsible for various parks and facilities. We are responsible for a little over almost 1,600 acres of parkland, which includes 36 developed parks, 11 open space parks, sports facilities, and also areas of beach. We manage 63 different facilities, and when we looked at the total number of facilities that the general fund in the city supports, 46% of those are parks and recreation responsibilities. So just under half of the city's general fund facilities fall under our responsibility. And last year we had approximately 200,000 activity participants in our various programs, and we had 1.2 million facility visitors to our various community centers and the Cabrillo Pavilion, etc. And without getting into numbers, this slide shows you how our general fund budget is spent, just by percentages. So starting at the top, we spend about 8% of the general fund budget on administration and managing our capital improvement program. And moving to the right, 34% of our budget is spent on parks, beaches, and facility landscape. So all of our maintenance of parks-related facilities and department facilities. 8% of our budget is spent on the street tree program, of which you just spent a lot of time this evening dealing with trees, and so that's a reflection of the priority for us for our resources. We also have non-parks contracts, so that would be the downtown maintenance we manage the contract for the downtown organization, maintenance of State Street and other things like that. We spend 20% of our budget just maintaining and operating the recreation facilities. So Los Baños Pool, the Carrillo Recreation Center, just no programs, just keeping the doors open and keeping them maintained to the best level we can. And we spend 22% of our budget on recreation programming. And on that note, I would just like to go back to the work session that you had on October 20th, where we really spent time going over the parks budget, park maintenance, and recreation programming. And that 22%, again, breaks out into thirds, with a third of those funds being spent on programs that are fully subsidized and available at no fees for our introductory programs and the programs that serve our low-income areas. And a third, we do have fees, but they are partially subsidized to keep those programs and activities accessible to various segments of the community. And a third is spent on fee-based classes that are actually generating revenue to cover all of their expenses. And that's how the general fund budget is spent in Parks and Recreation. It's also interesting to look at where we make our general fund revenue. So again, starting at the top, you can see that we make about 5% of our revenue in rents and leases, and this year our revenue is about $4.6 million. 23% from facility rentals, 28% from activities and classes, and 38% contracts. And again, the contracts are the UUT funds that come in to support the street tree program, the waterfront parking lot management and maintenance contract that we have, things like that. And then about 6% of our revenue is just miscellaneous. This is a slide that we did have with our budget presentation to you back in the spring, and in fact, the FY11 is actually, instead of recommended, it's adopted. I didn't catch that. I'm sorry. The green portion is showing you the portion of our revenue which is generated by us through fees and charges. And then the red is the portion that we receive. It's our subsidy from the general fund. And you can see that the green has gotten bigger, so we've been generating more revenue from fees and charges, and the red, which is our general fund support, has been declining. And in fact, since FY09, we have seen over a 28% reduction in general fund support for the Parks and Recreation Department, which is, that's why we're feeling the pinch and the difficulty when you look at the numbers. And just a reminder, because we've been going through this now for the last couple of years, that we did have some balancing strategies that we all agreed to before we went through the process. One, we increased revenues wherever we could. Two, we have people that leave the organization either for retiring or other jobs or other reasons, so they provide a vacancy. We took advantage of those vacancies, even though they weren't maybe convenient for us to have a vacancy in that particular position, but we restructured around those vacancies so that we were cutting a vacant position instead of cutting a person. We also worked to increase our co-sponsor contributions to offset their use of city facilities and our costs to maintain those facilities. And at your workshop, we talked about those a bit as well. We also tried to identify, and the Commission had encouraged us to do this, facilities that we might be able to switch to our community partners. We did that last year very successfully with Ealings Park and the Police Activities League. One of our higher priorities was to protect critical services that are not provided elsewhere in the community or are less accessible to people in the community. We feel that that's one of our important roles. And most important, we determined that we needed to protect parks and facilities even above programs where needed to ensure that the public continued to have access to recreation on their own, even if they weren't formal programs. And I think we've been pretty successful at that. This table just again shows you the changes in the general fund budget by division between fiscal year 09 and fiscal year 11. And you can see that we have had an increase in revenue by 1.6%. At the same time, we've decreased our expenditure budget by almost 20%. And the general fund subsidy, again, has declined by 28.4%. It is interesting to look at how the different divisions contributed either to the increase in revenue or the decline of expenses. And most of the decline in expenses is from positions and some program reductions. And the administrative division and the recreation division really took the greater reduction in expenses. But you'll notice on the revenue side, the recreation division had a 10.6 reduction in revenue over that time period. And that we have seen some decline in our, not necessarily in our programs so much, but in our facility reservations. I mean, just a true reflection of the economy. And we've also changed some of our programs and modeled them around. So you can just see that it varies by division. And it's also interesting to look at our workforce and look at the changes there. We have included the number of hourly hours so that you can see the full extent of the impact. For hourly employees, 2,080 hours would equate to a full-time position. So when you see the combined FTE on the third line down, that's taking the hourly hours and equating them into a portion of a full-time position so that we can see the full impact. But to see the full reduction of 55,000 hours that would have been supplied by our part-time employees, these are the people who are on the front line providing programs and services. And so these are pretty significant reductions. And in the recreation division is where you see the greatest impact of all, almost 55,000 hourly hours that have been cut from the budget over the last 2 years.
How many people, does that equate to about 25 people, the 54 and 55,000, if you divide 2,080 into those figures?
It would if you had hourly staff that were working 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
but generally most of our hourly staff are working anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week. So it's a large number of people.
So it could be 75 to 100?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a
would be-
significant number.
It's a significant number. And again, this is a reflection of our priorities of putting parks and facilities over programs. We can rebuild programs, but we need to make sure that we retain our parks and facilities so that they're available to people. And if you just drop down to the bottom line, that tells the difference. In the administrative division, we've seen a 13% reduction in workforce, and that number is not actually completely accurate for how we're operating this year, because in the administration division, we actually have 2 positions that are not included in that total reduction that are still listed in our budget but are not funded. And so we are operating with 2 less positions than that shows. In the Parks Division, they've had a 9.4% overall reduction in workforce. And of course, again, with Recreation, we see the biggest reduction, almost 37% reduction in workforce in the Recreation Division. And it is amazing and very impressive when you look at the performance measures that are part of the program budgets that were in your packet, and you see that there has not been that much reduction in services. There has. And our staff that are still doing the doing are doing the doing with a lot less support. And I will say that this, I think, is our greatest challenge. Do we have enough resources in place to do what we're doing on an ongoing basis? And staff are really taking the time this year to evaluate whether that is in fact the case. And I can tell you right now, we have not reduced services, I believe, to an adequate level to maintain this level of staffing for the years to come. So overall for the department, we've seen almost a 26% reduction in workforce.
Well, Ms. Rep, I mean, one of the more prominent positions I know that we lost was our business manager. And, that really does have a long-term impact. Not only does that work have to be done by someone, or all of you, but it takes us out of the planning realm, for the future. So, I mean, those are considerations. I don't think there's an answer to it tonight, but just for our newer commissioners to understand that, we really lost some of our planning for the future in this also. Everybody's just scrambling to stay even right now. So, those are things we'll be looking at down the road is, they're heavy to weigh. Do you, how do you keep people doing what they need to do?
And Commissioner Burns had asked me to speak a bit to what we think is ahead. And this is probably a good time to do it because I think the reality is that we are probably looking at this year. We don't have any firm numbers yet. We probably won't have those until December, January. But we're looking at another series of reductions this year. I don't think that they will be as deep. We're all crossing our fingers every time one of the sales tax reports or bed tax reports come in that, revenues are slowly growing, which is reassuring. But the reality is that government responds slower than other businesses in the community. And so it will take us a while. And I think it's realistic to expect that we will be continuing to operate the department at these reduced levels for the next few years. It's not realistic to anticipate otherwise, just as local businesses in the community are, anticipating how they're going to survive this, which I think really brings home the piece about making sure that it's doable. And that really needs to be our focus, because we have great staff that are very dedicated, but we cannot burn them out. And right now, they are all just working so hard to maintain the same level of service in most cases. And I just am not sure. I mean, we've been able to do it, and we're being as efficient as possible, but that is a concern as to whether we really have the right people in the right place to continue in this vein for the next few years. And we also have mentioned to you that we have seen an impact to our capital, the support for our capital program. The Parks and Recreation Department has over $32 million in unfunded capital program projects that are part of the city's capital improvement program. So we are already, deep in a hole. And so funding that we get, we really try to hang on to. But over the last couple of years, we have seen a reduction in our limited funding of almost $700,000. And that adds up through these different projects that have either had their funding eliminated or reduced. And many of these decisions, these were all decisions that we were involved in making the recommendations to the city administrator. We understand that it just challenges us more because the condition of our facilities continue to deteriorate. But that's really kind of where we are. Next month, Jill Zachary will be bringing to you the proposed 6-year capital program that will be considered by council for the FY12 budget. And she'll also be giving you a status report on various capital projects that we have underway. So we will, because there is still a lot, again, there's still work going forward, but primarily funded through RDA funds, some remaining state grant funds, and the city administrator and city council have still prioritized, with the limited amount of general fund capital money, they have prioritized things like the park playgrounds and replacing and updating the park restrooms. So those are two areas that we have continued to get support for, which are just very important for us as we look to the needs in the future. And in this slide, I just wanted to kind of bring it back. The Commission spent a lot of time talking about these various budget adjustments that went forward to City Council, and the ones in white were the ones that were implemented in full. The red is not very easy to read, but item number 4, eliminate the recreation program leader with the junior high program. And then with that program, the agreement with the SEIU for the labor negotiations that the City Council did actually bought back, if you will, the funding for that position. So that position was not cut. I will just, as an aside, say that the person who we were very lucky to have for a number of years is actually relocated back to Las Vegas, so we have lost her, and we are keeping the position vacant for savings at this point. She worked with our after-school program, and we really will miss her. And number 6, eliminating a vacant grounds maintenance worker 2 position. That position was also restored by council when they adopted the budget, and it was restored with the intent to avoid closing park restrooms and having to reduce the maintenance levels on Cabrillo Boulevard so dramatically. And on item number 7, we had proposed reducing the marketing coordinator from full-time to half-time, and so the half-time position was restored. and not cut. And again, that was due to a labor negotiation. So although our proposed budget had a little under $650,000 in proposed reductions, our actual reduction was about $476,000. So we were grateful when it came to the end of that process. And I will also say the other thing that council did, and it's not shown in that diagram, was that the council also chose to put funds back into our budget to ensure that the rec swim program at Ortega Park Pool continued, because that was actually a reduction in our budget. And I just really wanted to quickly go over some of the major work efforts and the work priorities, because in your packet you have all of the program budgets for each of the programs in the department. And in those budget pages for each program, you have a mission statement, a brief description of the program activities, what they do, some of their key objectives for the current year, and then you also have performance measures. So I am not going to reiterate a lot of those, but I did want to highlight some of the things that may not be in there, because these are more major efforts and things that we're focusing on.
Ms. Rapp, may I just ask a question about that while we're on those? The projected FY 2010 versus the amended, is the projected FY 2010, is that right before final, or are we including 10 months or of actuals? And
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, you know, that's a very interesting question that when I was going through and preparing for this presentation today, I wondered the same thing. And that we use these projected numbers when we worked with finance, and we probably updated them like April, May, somewhere in there.
So we might be looking at 9 months worth of actuals.
Yeah,
and,
so the actuals, you would have gotten the performance measurement report, the annual report. I believe you got that within the last couple of months, and it would have had all the updated numbers for FY10 once we had completed the year.
Okay.
But this was our best guess.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So in the administration division, of course, you know, the focus on the golf course, and I already talked about the CIP and the department budget. And you're very well aware of the efforts that we're making with the Park Foundation to be able to improve their fundraising ability to support programs and services. We continue to be involved with the city's efforts related to the South Coast Gang Task Force and the Front Country Trails. We have several capital projects that we have underway at the West Side Center and Oak Park and Mesa Lane Steps. And we also have some pretty significant efforts that administration is working closely with department staff on related to neighborhood and outreach services. And you also are very aware that we are doing a review of city policies related to large special events. So those are some pretty major efforts that we have going on in the administration division. In the Parks division, there's a real focus. We've had reductions in our funding for vegetative fuels and defensible space. So that means more careful planning of where we're going to spend our limited dollars, and the mapping and working with the fire department to achieve what we are obligated to achieve. Also, and you may be aware of this, but Mr. Escobar is actually the coordinator of the city's IPM program, so that's why it's reflected there as the city IPM program. We'll be replacing 2 park playgrounds, and as you know, we just completed all the Parma Park improvements. We are looking to renovate landscape beds with sustainable plantings wherever we can. And this year we'll make some significant progress on our urban forest management plan, and that will be coming to the commission for more of a work effort and public hearings in the future. And we have been working to expand our volunteer program and events so that we're actively trying to recruit additional resources. And the Cabrillo Ball Field Fence Project, which you may have seen has been in the news a bit and associated with the concerns for the homeless situation on Lower Milpas. And in the Recreation Division, as you know, we're working very closely to get the Neighborhood Advisory Council formally established, and the recruitment for the new members and staff will be working very closely with them to help them get off the ground and get off to a good start. We're also focusing on having a successful transition of the Teen Center and also the Las Positas tennis courts. So it's not simply a hands-off and we're done. We're still engaged and wanting to make sure that it's a successful transition. Neighborhood and Outreach Services is developing this year an outreach and project plan. So they will have some very defined objectives to move that whole concept forward. One of the fun things that we'll be doing is getting ready for the grand opening of the Carrillo Recreation Center. Right now it looks like construction may wrap up sometime in February, and we may have access to the building at that time, but we will still be doing some construction in terms of the front courtyard, and we'll be looking at doing a grand opening sometime in late spring. We continue to develop new programs and revenue, and working this year to establish a teen center at the Franklin Center, and also our goal of $250,000 in grants, donations, and scholarships. Golf Division, real focus on increasing rounds and revenue. We're also trying to upgrade our irrigation software to add the GPS mapping and labeling so that we're ready for the future and to make us more efficient. Mark Reed is establishing and moving forward a more aggressive tree pruning program with a focus on how it improves the actual play of the golf course. And I love the way he words it here. Continue old world agronomic practices to reduce chemical use, because that is what Mark has been able to do, and he is not new technology. He is going back to how they used to do it, and he's been very successful with that. And we also are continuing to pursue full Audubon certification for the golf course. And in the Creeks Division, you'll see most of this is all project related, but their priorities are the Mission Creek Restoration and Steelhead Passage project at Talent Road, which should be almost complete, almost there. And the city's stormwater ordinance, the Creeks program is in the lead for that for the city, so they're working on that. Preliminary design on the Mission Lagoon, Laguna Channel restoration project, and wanting to do a redesign of the website to improve user friendliness of the Creeks information, to educate people and have resources available for them online. And completing the installation of the catch basin debris screens in all of the gutter areas in the downtown area and other parts of the city. And the final design of the Mission Creek Steelhead Passage project at the Caltrans channels. So those are some of their major focuses. And so with that, that really gives us kind of a focus of where we are spending our time. There's a lot of good work going on. And so again, trying, when we go through the difficult times of identifying the budget reductions and having to cut, we've been doing that. I think we've made some good decisions in how to reduce services and reduce our reliance on the general fund, and there's still a lot of good work being done on a daily basis throughout the department. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Well, thank you for a great presentation. Full of information in very difficult times. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Burns?
Yeah. Thank you also. It was just an amazing presentation. You forget how much work is done, especially with the limited resources we have. But on a question, just because the school board was talking that they've got some issues and the county was talking of some issues, we don't see anything right now of any further reduction this fiscal year, or do we? Or do we know anything?
At this point, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Burns, I'm part of the city's budget policy steering committee with other department heads in the finance department, city administrator. We will start meeting in November. At this point, I don't know if we'll be looking at mid-year reductions, and we are looking at some rough numbers for what we might be looking at next year overall for the general fund. But it is preliminary for us. And I think if the numbers were leaning towards us needing to make reductions, we would have been having those meetings, because as you know, we made reductions in August of last year and again in January. So we're hopeful. As a department, we are holding salary savings for a couple of vacant positions, so that will help us if we are required to make reductions mid-year. But we haven't heard anything yet.
Anyone? I would love for the commission and maybe it's subcommittee or really explore. I know that volunteer opportunities are cost staff time. They're not free of charge, and then equipment and things like that. But my gut tells me, for lack of a better word, that there's some really great opportunities out there for partnering parks and maybe Park Foundation or some other organization to, really get involved and maybe carry some of the load here, because it's going to be a long haul, I think. I think we all realize that. I know one of the work priorities is expanded volunteer program and events, and I would love for the commission to get involved in that, or, as I said, a subcommittee, and really try to brainstorm some ways that might be helpful to the department to accomplish some things.
Along that line, this is something we've talked about a lot, and definitely can be a tremendous benefit. But I think what we also see is what we need are not the community work days that are sort of the fun sort of, but those take a tremendous amount of staff time. But we look towards the Master Gardeners, the Rose Society, the groups that can take it on themselves, the neighborhood group that will empty a trash can, pick up litter. So I think what we really need to foster when we look at a volunteer program is the working relationship with other organizations. And sometimes I think we get stymied with that because we're so short of staff time. So it would be interesting, since we have a little venue here, to say that what we need is our neighborhood organizations to step up, churches that are in communities near parks that want to do community service, but that can organize it themselves, that we don't have to dedicate a staff person on a Saturday to organize the whole thing, set it up, and then, work it at the end. So I'd like to see us figure out how to work with other groups. But I'm very aware of the limited staff time we had. I mean, Saturday was a wonderful planting at Parma Park. And there were tremendous volunteers there. But, you look at the staff time that it takes to go in and plant that, and you think probably they could have sent a crew up there and done it in the same amount of time. Now, that doesn't give you love of the park. It doesn't educate the community. But as we really look realistically at our budget, what are we here to, how do we blend those two? So as we sit and talk about it, I think we have to get more input from the community that's willing to come. I mean, I think Mr. Burns understands. He's done a lot of that, and you can work tremendously hard and have 3 people show up.
But that's only if I invite all my friends. Well, actually, maybe one more. Just as a comment, just as what you came up with, and I don't know if this makes any sense at all, but right now we're spending half of staff time on fundraising. We ought to look at that along with fundraising and volunteerism. And I don't know if it's quite a match or not, and it may not fit, but that's just throwing that out there.
I had exactly the same thought. I kind of connected the dots between Park Foundation and volunteer, and maybe there's again, they're speaking off the top of my head, but there have got to be groups out there where we can have a fundraiser and a volunteer effort at the same time and really go for it.
If I could just add, we grapple with this just as you are grappling with it right now. And one of the things that we determined, actually with the completion of the work at Parma Park, that the staff person that was responsible for that work would actually be redirected beginning the new calendar year to spend more time to really develop a volunteer program. So we would be happy once we have to sort of clear the decks of some projects that she's working on. Now, it won't be full-time because she has other responsibilities, but to really dedicate some resources and time to defining what type of program we could develop and then implement it, and certainly working in close coordination with fund development and everything else that the department does to involve people in our parks and in our recreation programs. So we've begun to set aside that resource, and certainly would come back to the Commission with some of our ideas in the very near future and seek your input and advice on them as well.
Thanks, Ms.
Maybe as you do that, maybe the role the Commission can play in it is maybe the Commission can assist in presentations to give some weight to what volunteerism is. Like if you start to present to churches or whatever, maybe we can take some responsibility to do initial outreach to help with that. Rather than giving more jobs to staff, I'm more interested in taking responsibility for things.
Some of the load off, yeah. Yeah, I think that's, yes, Mr. Casebeer?
I'd just like to comment, last week when we had our budget review sessions, the thing that really affected me was the reductions in the level of services in our parks. I just, maybe I haven't been as attentive as I should have been, but it just really floored me to see, the reductions for the numbers of times that a park grass will be mowed. Instead of once a week, it's every 2 or 3 weeks, or the times that a restroom will be cleaned. And I think the general public, it's really crucial that the general public become aware that these are your parks, and these are the levels of services that you as a citizen of our community are going to receive or not receive. And because I think a lot of people just think that mysteriously somehow the parks get maintained and they're beautiful and nice and well, they are not as well as Santos Escobar described it as Disneyland. You know, the level of service that our parks look like Disneyland. Well, with the economic times today, we're well below Disneyland levels. And I wish we were at Disneyland. And I want to commend staff and the workers out in the parks and on the streets and getting things done. It's amazing that our parks are looking as good as they are.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
And on that line, things go down gradually, so it's not like, you know, everything looked great yesterday and now we're done. You know, it's such a gradual decline that I think it becomes out of people's awareness. But the other thing is, and this, as we look at recreation, we've done well to protect our after-school programs and things like that. But people have to be aware, if those go away, those are children that go home alone after school. Those are children that are vulnerable to get into problems. So, you know, the department does many things that recreation doesn't begin to describe those services. To me, those are prevention and important to the community. So there's a lot of things that are near and dear to my heart to protect, and we have to, as Ms. Rapp said, we can't burn out our staff so that we have no one to even lead these charges. So it's big.
Thank you so much. That was very informative and I think eye-opening when you really look at, I mean, when you think of 46% of the facilities, that's an astounding number. And staff's just done a great job. The department's done a great job. You know. Yes.
And on that 46% of the facilities, it was also mentioned that we've got about $32 million in deferred maintenance, and it's my recollection that it costs about $2 million to maintain, and we're putting in about $900,000. So every year it's getting worse. So I mean, we've got to look at some long-term solutions because, as you were saying, you don't notice it, but then suddenly that nice building is got dry rot and all those other fun things. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have, I think that concludes that. We have no old business, and new business was moved, which was the appointments. So I would entertain, should I make this announcement before we adjourn or about the next meeting? Yeah, okay. One announcement. The next regular meeting in November and December, they're a little earlier, so it will be at the City Hall Council Chambers on Wednesday, November 17th at 4 o'clock. So that's 1 week earlier than it normally is held. So, do I hear?
I move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?